Okay, let's get started. Ooh. Turn the volume down a little bit. Is that better in the back? No, it's still echoing a little bit. How's that? Just a little bit more, and I think we'll have it. Thank you, sir. All righty, a few announcements before we begin. There will be a wedding shower for Cliff Chafin and Ashlyn Quisenberry Sunday, January the 21st at 1:30 at Jan Penrod's home, and they're registered at Amazon and Target. You can start signing up for the Summer Spring Family Retreat, starting on the 21st, and be on the lookout for more information coming. Some prayer requests of those who are not able to be with us due to sickness and things that going on in their family. Barry Crane will have esophagus surgery January the 17th at Spring Hill. Gentry Miller leaves for additional training tomorrow. And on that, after the second bell, the group in the multipurpose building is going to come in here, and we're going to have Sean's going to lead a prayer on behalf of Gentry. He's going into Ranger training, and so we need to be mindful of him. And then not too long in the future, Peyton Cole will be leaving. We'll do something for him also when it gets closer. John Nevins requests prayers for his sister in California, Julie Gabrion. Are the Nevins here? I don't know if I said that right. She has a rare bone disease and is very sick. Michelle Ashlyn went home on Wednesday. Wanda House has moved to the Lakes in Maumelle for rehab and long-term care. Remember, she's recovering from a stroke. And then remember our Summers website. And just an update, Karen talked to Rebecca, and I talked to, what's the daughter's name? No, the daughter. Mary. There's nothing wrong with me, y'all. You're in trouble tonight. But they said Tim's making progress. He has therapy on Wednesday, so he's pretty well wore out. But they are listening online, so give them a shout. And also, I talked to Barbara Cloninger this morning. She's been listening online, and so they would all both appreciate. And I see we have a special person back tonight, Treva. It's good to have you with us. I know it's been a struggle, but we're glad you're here. Glad you could make it with us. So, all right. And again, as always, for those listening online, when there's questions or comments out in the audience, there's a microphone down here that picks up stuff, but if I think your voice is a little low, I'll probably repeat that for those listening online. And then if they I'm watching the YouTube channel, and if they send a comment through, I'll share it with the group. It's interesting, there's about 14 or 15 computers log into the YouTube channel and about 40 on the Facebook channel. So there's people out there that are dialing in, listening, don't know who everyone is other than the Jorgensens and Claudia. Not Claudia. Claudia's right there. You're tuned in too, aren't you? Boy, y'all better watch me tonight. And we are doing Exodus, right? Yes. Barbara Cloninger. So I know that those are, and I think there's some others that I know, but I'm not confirmed. Okay, so last week we went through a period where Moses is very discouraged, and then the people got very discouraged because the taskmasters were harsh and very difficult to work with, and took their straw away and made them go hunting for straw, and so they had to do that on their own, and they turned on Moses like crowds. You know, if you've watched crowd control, the crowd can turn on a person. You know, it's kind of like a coach. He has a good season, and then the next season doesn't do so good, and everybody wants to fire him. And that's kind of where they were with Moses. But God did remind them of the promise that He'd made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and He said, I'm going to keep that promise. I said I was going to do it, and I'm going to do it. And then just the overall hardship. So this week is when the battle really begins. This is the great confrontation of the Old Testament between God and a pagan ruler. And we'll cover about the first 6 plagues. I think we may get through all 6 that I'm planning to tonight, but we may not. There are 2 proverbs that came to mind for me. Proverbs 21:3. The king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever He pleases. And then further down the same chapter, in verse 30, there is no wisdom, no understanding, and no counsel against the Lord. In our day and time, we're looking back and we see the miracles and everything. I know that God is working today and making sure that His will is accomplished. For instance, He said the church will stand forever, the kingdom will not be destroyed. So He does whatever is necessary. I don't see it all the time. I don't understand all the time, but I do know, I have confidence in that. Another promise that Jesus made in the Beatitudes, that if you hunger and thirst for righteousness, what did He say? You will be filled. So I firmly believe if there's a person out there, no matter where they are, if they're looking for the truth and they're hungering and thirsting for righteousness, there'll be a way. It will happen. Somehow they will get the opportunity. I don't know how God will make that happen. I just have confidence that He will. And those are some of the things that I think. And these promises that we get to see fulfilled help reassure us on the promises that are made that we are living under today. So, the first confrontation is really a minor one. It's really about, it's a show and tell. In chapter 7, verses 8 through 13, He says, you just go, you throw your staff down, it turns into a serpent. And in verse 10 through 13, they did that. The magicians were able to do that. And if any of you have seen magic shows, it's amazing what they can do and how they can fool us into thinking things and things disappearing and people cut in half and all those kind of things. So from ancient times, magicians have been able to do that, and those magicians were able to do this also, with one difference. What was the difference?
Aaron's staff swallowed the other.
Yeah, the others got ate, didn't they? Yes. And so there was the first kind of a blow there that God said, I'm done. He's to the point here, He's done. He's going to remove the children of Israel one way or another, and it can be easy or hard. And so it says that in verse 13, his heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. So the first, what I call the real confrontation in the plague of blood, the first plague. Verse 14, he said, the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to him in the morning down by the river. And in verse 17, he says, by this you shall know I am the Lord. I will strike the water in the Nile, and everything will turn to blood. And that's exactly what happened. In verse 19, it says that take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, over the streams, over the pools, over all the reservoirs, that they may become blood. And there will be blood throughout the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. And so he did that, and did that in the sight of Pharaoh. And verse 21 says the fish that were in the Nile died, and then the Nile began to stink. If you've been around a slaughterhouse, you know exactly how a bunch of blood just pouring out everywhere as it dries and congeals and all, does everything that it does, it stinks. And that's what was going on here. And it says in verse 21, they could not drink the water from the Nile, and the blood was throughout all the land of Egypt. But the magicians did the same thing with their secret arts, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he didn't listen. And he went to his house. It said he showed no concern, and that lasted for 7 days. One of the criticisms of the Bible is that this was just red silt coming down the Nile River. What are the things in this record that tell you it was miraculous? This was really blood, that it was miraculous. What are the things in the account that tell you that?
Fish died.
Fish died.
They couldn't drink it.
They couldn't drink it. And what else? One more thing that I think is even way more cool. The water that they had in their houses in the jugs even turned to blood. And so it wasn't just, so there was no way, even if it said, okay, it was silt, okay, well, how did it get into all the water jugs and all the houses of Egypt? Any of you guys that have been fishing know that the fish will live in muddy water. I've caught fish in muddy water. They do just fine in muddy water. So silt, it would have to be extremely thick if it was muddy water to cause a problem. Yes?
There's a show that I watched called Exodus Decoded.
Yes.
And they went through all of these plagues, and they didn't really mention, they would say, the biblical story says such and such. They geographically showed how all these different plagues would have happened, and one caused the other, caused the other. But at the end of it, they summed it up with like, God caused all that to happen. It was like, it happened geographical, this, however the way they said, but it was God controlling the elements. So they did get covered.
You know, I think I've heard of that show, hadn't seen it, and for the benefit of those online, Melba, it's called Exodus Decoded. And they talked about a physical cause.
Right, under earthquakes and,
Right.
and just all of the things like that, just one thing causes the other, and they explained it, and if you didn't know the biblical story, you would, and every time it's like, even with the Pharaoh's children died, and the Egyptians did, because the Pharaoh, the eldest son, he's privileged and he sleeps closer to the floor, so the angel of death got him.
Got him, okay. And I really think it's important to watch those shows and read the articles. I read an article about it years ago. It's probably along the same line where they gave a physical reason for everything. It's important, I think, to watch those, to read those things, because we are going to have to give answers sometimes if we're teaching someone. The critics are out there. And just like this, the record, it would be hard to give a physical reason for the water in the water jugs to be turned to blood. You couldn't explain. Yeah, left that part out. But I think it's important because in the last class I taught, I can't remember exactly what the topic was, where we talked about how the number of people in the United States who say they're a Christian. I'm not talking ones who really are, who live it. I'm talking about the people who just say I'm a Christian is gradually decreasing year by year, and it's down to about 70%. In the 60s, somewhere a little over 90% of the people in the United States says I'm a Christian. It's now down to 7 in the 70s, and I mean closer to 70 than to 80. And if the trend continues, my kids and grandkids are going to live in a nation that much less than 50% of the people say, I'm a Christian. We're going to have to deal with this. We're going to have to be able to give an answer. We're going to have to teach our kids and our grandkids how to answer these things. I think it's important to read that so that we can defend the faith against that. There's a guy that I follow online that he is a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, and he spends his time debunking the Bible, because obviously they believe in the Book of Mormon. But I want to hear what he has to say, because he's got an audience of about 500,000 people. So I want to hear what he's got to say. And so it's important, I think, to read and hear something so that we can give an answer and to teach people when they struggle into this, because it's coming, folks. It's coming. And we're going to have to deal with it. The church is going to have to deal with it, so we need to prepare ourselves. And so it's good to see those things and then compare it to the Word and see how it stands up. So In verse 22, it talked about the magicians. I want to get off my little soapbox there for now. These magicians are named in 2 Timothy 3, verses 8 and 9. Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so these men opposed truth, and it talked about them, how they had rejected the faith, and their folly would be obvious in verse 9, and their folly. And so we know we weren't given their names in Exodus, but Paul gave the names under inspiration. And it's interesting, I went to the commentaries and they looked up the traditions. One tradition that was in the Jamieson Fawcett Brown commentary said they died in when they chased the children of Israel into the Red Sea. Another guy said, well, he thought they converted to the Hebrew religion. I don't think so, based on what Paul said. But another commenter said, well, these guys were the ones who really helped Pharaoh harden his heart, and that I certainly agree with, because he used them and he referred to them different times. Adam Clark says one tradition he read that they were the actual ones who taught Moses when he was a little boy in Pharaoh's house. So all of these are nice, cute stories. We just don't know what. So taking a pause here and consider this. Do you think God is allowing them to keep pushing back instead of just taking, I mean, he could just take them out on the spot. He could just say, I'm done. And just like Korah and his family, just the earth swallow them up and be done with it. Do you think there's a purpose in him allowing them to continue to fight against what Moses is saying and even appear that they can do the same things? There's the appearance, and it's convincing Pharaoh he's using them. Do you think God is allowing that to continue for a point in time? What do you think? Claudia, you look puzzled.
Well, he didn't stop it.
He didn't stop it. He could have, but he didn't.
He needed that thing in the way to keep Moses coming forward to him, but he also needed some antagonist to keep Pharaoh from following what Moses wanted him to do.
Yes, and remember, and God is going to say this a couple of times. He says, I'm going to use Pharaoh to show the world. And so allowing this to continue for a while, it's anybody's guess how long these 10 plagues took to happen. Some people say 30 days. I think that's a little quick. Some people say about 90 days, which may be a little more reasonable, but no one really knows. But this confrontation, sometimes I think that God looks at that and says, I'm going to let this play out so people can really see, and I'm going to utter, at one point, the hammer is going to drop. And everybody, yes, Claudia?
I was just trying to think how to say what's in my head. I think he did allow that because that gave them time for it to really spread to people and for it to continue on and on. I'm not using the right word. But I was reading a fictionalized story about Rahab, and she apparently had heard, they had heard about this God and what he had done with these plagues. So I think, yes, he did use that.
I agree with you. For those listening online, Claudia said that it gave time for the story to spread. They didn't have 24-hour cable news like we do, and so they're going by word of mouth. It doesn't. Now, a good story is going to go pretty fast. A good story is really going to go pretty fast, but still, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that need to get the message. And yes, Rahab, that's one of the things she said. We know it's over. We know that, and so she said, I want to be on the winning side because I heard what happened, and we know. And so that's a very good point. So as we continue on, Pharaoh went to his house and let it go on. It went on for 7 days. Now, oops, got my pages out of order here. The next plague, the second plague of frogs. So the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and say, let my people go, but if you refuse, I will smite your whole territory with frogs. This is just repulsive. Just nasty. And the Nile will swarm with frogs, and will come into your house, into your bedrooms, in your bed, and houses of your servants and your people, into your ovens, into your kneading bowls. And frogs will come up, and they'll be everywhere. And so that's what happened. The magicians did the same with their secret arts, making frogs come up out of the land. And Pharaoh, but this time, Pharaoh called for Moses, says, can you do something about these frogs? Can you do something about these frogs? My question is, well, why didn't he get his magicians to get rid of the frogs? They made frogs appeared, but he didn't get them to do it. Because I think he knew that the only guy who was going to be able to get rid of the frogs was Moses and his connection to Jehovah. He didn't get the magicians to do that. And Moses tells him, says, well, you tell me when, and he says tomorrow in verse 10, and so that's what happened. And so they piled them in heaps, and the land became foul, and rotting dead flesh smells so good, so good. And so that's all over. The frogs were everywhere. One of the things we talked about coming into this is the plagues were going to defeat the deities of Egypt. Frogs actually were a deity. I can't imagine this, and I think you're probably in the same place that I am, but they were a symbol of the god of fertility, according to Burton Kaufman's commentary. And, you know, I put in my notes, why frogs? It's because they are nasty. And you don't want them in your food and in your bed and everywhere you go. And you just don't want that. So how do we know this was a miracle? What are the things that tell us that this was a miracle?
It appeared in the houses with the doors closed.
Everywhere, they showed up on command, and they died on command, which is critical to showing that they are under the power, that they are power on God. And it doesn't say that directly, but the magicians didn't make them leave or couldn't make them leave. And Pharaoh knew he had to get Moses to do that. This is the first time in verse 8 when Pharaoh calls upon God, says, please ask him on my behalf, entreat to let him go. But after their relief, what happened? Like starting all over. Let me take a side path here. How many times have we been in a jam and we pray to get out of the jam? And then we're out of the jam and we forget and go on about our merry way as if nothing ever happened. We can be just as guilty of that as Pharaoh. He was in a jam, he got out of the jam, and then he went on his merry way like nothing had ever happened. We can be just as guilty on that. Chad?
This is one time I really don't understand Pharaoh.
Yeah.
When Moses asked him, when do you want the frogs to go away? It wasn't now, which I would do.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah, that didn't make sense to me either. I mean, I'd be saying, now, buddy, get out there. Get rid of it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's almost, now remember that Pharaoh thinks he's a god, and so he wants some control. Moses allowed him some control to say when. But if I would have been given the control, I'd be saying, 5 minutes ago was late. And so I'm with you on that. I don't understand why Pharaoh didn't say, let's do it, man. All right. Verse 16, the Lord said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand, strike the dust of the earth, that it may come gnats throughout the land. This is another nasty one, isn't it? They did so, and it went everywhere. The gnats were on man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats throughout the land of Egypt. Here's beginning to be a turning point. The magicians tried, but they couldn't. And there were gnats everywhere. And the magicians said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. They realized before Pharaoh did, but his heart was hardened. Now it's interesting, if you read the different translations, They're called gnats, lice, ticks, mosquitoes, maggots, fleas, which tells me nobody knows. It was some nasty bug, and it got everywhere. And that's that's enough. That is enough. You just got rid of the frogs, and now you've got this. This is really, to me, a turning point at this third plague. He is beginning to lose support amongst the people. He is king, and he has all power and can do whatever he wants, but to a limit. If the people get a gutful, they're going to rebel, and he knows it. He's not stupid. He is a politician. He knows the people. He's got to keep the people happy, and he is beginning to lose the support of the people, and it's starting in his own palace. So the fourth plague. How are we doing on time? Good. The plague of flies. Flies. Y'all better really check me tonight. Some McDonald's fries would be good about now, wouldn't they? But anyway, the plague of flies. So the Lord said to Moses, get up early, present yourself before Pharaoh when he comes out to the water, and say to him, just a side note, why do you think he's always going out to the river? Why is Pharaoh going out to the river? Just what do you think? Pardon?
To worship.
Worship. The Nile is a god. It's important. That's where Pharaoh's daughter found Moses, was at the river. She had gone down to the river, and they bathed in it. And I didn't find anything to say that there was healing art, a healing that was supposed to be attached to the Nile River, but they did. It was very important. It is the main thing in Egypt, and so it was important. And probably he did go down to worship each morning. So, anyway, so in verse 20, let my people go, for if you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants and on your people in your houses, houses of the Egyptians, also the ground on which they dwell. But on that day, here's another turning point. I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people are living, so that no swarms of flies will be there, in order that you may know that I, the Lord, am in the midst of the land. And I will put a division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign will occur. Verse 24, the Lord did so. There were great swarms of flies in the house of Pharaoh, the houses of his servants, and the land was laid waste because swarms of flies. Again, flies. I mean, you can't eat without flies landing on your food and following you everywhere you go, just swarms. One of the descriptions one commenter gave says they were so thick they covered the ground and the ground looked black. There were so many. And again, just filthy, nasty. Now, Pharaoh's up towards the upper end, the northern part of Egypt. It's going to take a while before the word gets all the way down south in the southern region of Egypt. It's a pretty large country. And again, I think, Claudia, this goes back to your point. It takes time. So these things are happening. And so, you're the poor guy. All you're doing is got your mule and you're plowing your ground and you're minding your business, and then frogs and then flies. And so you got to be thinking, what is going on? And so the first time you might think, well, it was just an aberration, just no big deal. But then, the next thing comes along, and then you start saying, what are you hearing, down at the city square, what are you hearing, while they're burning the piles of dead frogs? Have you heard anything about what's going on? What do you think happened? And so they start talking, and it does take a while for the word to spread. It was, it'd probably take, if a guy started heading south, it'd probably take 2-3 weeks maybe to get down there and say, guess what happened? This guy Moses showed up at Pharaoh's house, said this is going to happen, and yes, it did happen. And so then people are going to start asking questions, and the word's going to spread in that community. And so they're going to be wondering. So it does take a while. So anyway, so the flies come in verse 24. Pharaoh says, go sacrifice. And Moses, but he says, within the land. What is the problem with them sacrificing animals within the land of Egypt? What's the problem?
Sheep
Sheep were an abomination. They don't care for shepherds. We learned that with Joseph, didn't he? That's why he set them apart. But what else? Are they going to sacrifice a bull? That's one of their gods. You know, Texas Roadhouse is not going to do well in India, is it? Because cows are holy. Same thing here. These animals that they're potentially going to sacrifice are gods, and so they can't do it there. And Moses points that out in verse 26. We can't do this. This would be an abomination. If we sacrifice what is an abomination, then they'll stone us, and they absolutely would. They would go crazy. It says we got to go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he commands us. Pharaoh said, I'll let you go to sacrifice, but you can't go very far away. He's trying to negotiate. And so this is, to me, the first really significant sign. He's getting desperate. He's trying to come up with a solution here. He's got to try to compromise some way to allow them to do what they want to do and save face and get rid of this problem that he's got. And so he's trying to work through all this. And Moses said, I'm going out from you in verse 29. I'll make supplication and the flies will leave and from the people. And he warns him, don't let Pharaoh deal deceitfully again and not letting people go to sacrifice. Moses went out in verse 30, made supplication. And lo and behold, in verse 32, Pharaoh hardened his heart and he did not let the people go. 4 times now, Pharaoh has hardened his own heart. And we talked about this in when we started in this discussion about Pharaoh. There is a point that God says, that's enough. There is a point. And we talked about this in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that when you believe a lie, at some point He's going to help you. You want to lie, and you believe in a lie, you don't want to believe the truth, I will help you. Here you go. You want to do this. These are the consequences of our actions. When we constantly refuse, then it's like God says, I'm done. Okay. You want to be with the devil? You want to do this? Go right ahead. And God is approaching that point here because Pharaoh now 4 times has seen 4 great miracles, and he's hardened his heart each time. And really, what has Pharaoh wanted out of each time? What has he wanted each time? He just wants out of the jam. He just wants the problem to go away. He really doesn't care about the Israelites. He really doesn't care about all. He just wants the problem to go away. And he's not getting it. So, first time there was a distinction. The first time there was an attempt to compromise, and two attempts in verse 25, 28, 2 attempts at compromising. It's interesting, this particular plague is mentioned 2 times in the Psalms, Psalm 78 and Psalms 105. So, what do you think would have happened if Pharaoh would have said, well, okay, just go a little ways, and Moses, and he would have let him go? What would have happened? Do you think that was God was really to that point for this to be over, or did God want it to continue? And I know I'm always hesitant to try to put myself in God's mind, but thinking about what he said, I'm going to harden his heart and I'm going to use him to show everybody that there's a God, and I want everybody to know it. So do you think at this point he would have said, okay, go ahead and go, Moses, go ahead and go?
I don't think so.
Okay, Charles?
I think God wanted to continue this on to show everybody, even to us today, that he is the God. He's going to give us a chance to straighten up and do right. But he just showed, I'm going to progress this. The longer you stay away from it, the longer I'm going to punish you. You're not going to win.
I agree. This is a showdown, and he God is showing who is in charge of the world, the universe. And I agree with you. Chad, did you have your hand up?
Yes, you mentioned earlier, and I've studied this before, where each one of the plagues was actually defeating an Egyptian god.
Yes.
If it had just stopped in the middle, the Egyptians might have gone on believing, well, he was starting those 5 each. Now we got these other 5 we can continue to worship.
Right.
And I think God was going to show the world there is no other God.
Correct. Now, I got a question from the control room. Tim.
The magicians were able to reproduce a little bit, like with the rod and the snake and the frog and stuff. They never were able to make them stop or go away.
Correct. Good point. Good point. They could sort of reproduce, as Tim said, for those listening online, but they could never make them stop. And Pharaoh knew that, didn't he? Good point. I agree with both comments about God knew that this was Pharaoh's mind. Claudia, did you have your hand up?
Well, I was just going to say in chapter 9, he says, I could just watch you out, and I didn't. And I am using you.
Yes.
In verse 16, I'm using you, raise you up for this purpose.
Yes.
That everybody will know my power.
Exactly. And, jumping ahead to your comment about Rahab, it served God's purpose to get the word out so that when they came walking out of there, people knew, we best be careful when we're dealing with these folks. Now, a few folks like the Amalekites thought they knew better to their detriment. But as Rahab pointed out, we know. Otherwise, the whole city of Jericho wouldn't have been all boarded up and watertight to keep things going. All right. So the plague 5, the pestilence on the livestock. And again, I'll go ahead and say, no one really knows exactly what this pestilence is. It just killed a lot of the livestock. Anyway, so he goes to Pharaoh in chapter 9, verse 1. And he says in verse 2, if you refuse to let them go and continue to hold them, the hand of God will come with a very severe pestilence on your livestock which are in the field. And I think that's an important phrase there. On the horses, donkeys, and camels, herds, flocks. The Lord will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and livestock of Egypt so that nothing will die of all that belongs to the sons of Israel. And the Lord said tomorrow in verse 5. So he did this. In verse 6 it said all of the livestock died. This is one of the places where Bible critics jump because later on there's going to be some more livestock killed. One of the things that Brother Kaufman mentioned in his commentary that Moses, in writing this down and documenting, said the livestock that's in the field. Remember that much of their livestock was considered holy and godly, and so he felt like that much of it was in barns, in stalls, and whatever. And so was kind of separated and protected from this particular one. And he readily admits this is what I think perhaps is going on here. And again, this is another god. Apis, the god of Memphis, was a bull, and the queen goddess was a cow. Ladies, wouldn't you want to be a cow as a god? I mean, couldn't they pick something better? I mean, really. But anyway, in the Truth for Today commentary, he pointed out that really when and he mentioned other places where they said all, when it was just saying a whole, using that term to mean a whole lot. So anyway, Pharaoh did check. He did some investigation. To his credit, he sent someone to the Israelite side, and lo and behold, nothing's dead over there. Also, this now is getting to the point, this is the first time there's been real death on a massive scale. And this is a time when, we could be endangering people's lives because if livestock's dead, they don't have anything to plow the fields with. They don't have anything to produce the milk. They could lose the infant animals. And so we're beginning to threaten their livelihood at this point. So anyway, the 6th plague. We got just a couple of minutes left. Lord said to Moses, take handfuls of soot from a kiln, and it will become boils, in verse 9, on man and beast throughout the land of Egypt. They did it, and the magicians could not stand before Moses, in verse 11, because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians as well as on the Egyptians. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not listen to them. Lest we think that the boils weren't a serious illness. I don't know if you've ever had a boil, but they're quite painful. Also, if you remember the story of Hezekiah, remember he had a boil, and Isaiah said, you need to prepare yourself. Remember, he turned to the wall and prayed, and God sent a message to Isaiah, and he sent him back and told him to put a poultice on it. And he gave him, 10 more years? Is that right? 15. And so one of the great Bible stories, because what happened? The sun went backwards to show that it was, that God could make it happen. All right.
Tommy, it's almost like none of this happened to Pharaoh, that it only got on everybody else.
Well,
I mean, it did.
yes.
But it's like, he was just, you know, having to make that decision.
You make a good point there. I think he's doing an awful lot to save face. He is the man, and he's a God, and he's really got to stand up. And so you wonder just how much his family's, they're obviously suffering, but I don't think he's going to, this is my opinion, I don't think he's going to let anybody know.
He has to be tough.
He's got to be tough. He's the man, you know. And so he's got to stand up and be the leader here. So this, again, is the next, what I consider the next step, turning point. The Lord has allowed this to go on, and now he is hardening Pharaoh's heart. He is making him stiff-lipped, and he is not going to fold until he's destroyed. The magicians have admitted, you know, at this point, when you look back, the magicians eventually admitted defeat. The people of Egypt have got to be questioning their beliefs that all of these things are happening. And you know, they're here by this point, they're hearing about Moses. It has to be at least 30, 40, 50 days that this has been going on. So the word's gotten out. And so they got to hear about Moses and wondering what's going on. And surely at this point they are also questioning their beliefs and what they think. And the word is spreading, I think, across the region, as we've seen with others. Egypt is in a mess already, and it's only going to get worse because of Pharaoh's hardening of his heart. Lesson for us: we continue to disbelieve and reject and not believe the truth, and our heart gets hard, it will only get worse for us. It will, as we continue to reject and disbelieve and refuse to accept God's mercy, it will only get worse for us. Maybe it won't be to this extent. It won't be the rain of cattle and bulls and all of this kind of stuff, but our life will spin out of control when we start rejecting God, and we'll look around one day, we won't have family, we won't have friends, we won't have a support system that we had before. So next week, we'll do 7, 8, and 9, and then there's a chapter that will introduce the plague on the firstborn. And this, we're getting to the point, and the Passover to me is the Acts 2 of the Old Testament. This is it. This is when it happens. Just like when Peter preached the sermon on the sermon in Acts chapter 2, and the doors to the kingdom were opened, and he used that key that Jesus told him he should use. This is Moses doing the same thing, that God is establishing his kingdom. He has put his mark down and says, here, it is now. And he's doing that. And to me, this is the Acts chapter 2 of the Old Testament. So I really appreciate everybody's comments. Sir.
You just said 7, 8, and 9.
No, we just went through 6. Next week, we're going to do 7, 8, and 9. We did up through 6 today.
6 flags.
Oh, I'm talking about the plagues. Thanks, Larry.
I thought you were talking about the chapter.
No. Now, hang around because, well, some are already coming for our prayer on behalf of Gentry Miller. So hang around if you can. Thank you, and I really appreciate everybody's comments.